Hello, it's Victoria from Coastal Themes, and in today's video we're going to be discussing the block structure on Webflow. And if this means nothing to you, or if this means something to you, you will know that the block structure is how your site is built. If we go into the Webflow interface, whether you've got a theme that you've purchased, you're building your page from scratch, or you just need to add something to a website, and you happen to be on Webflow, you will come into contact with the Add Elements section, and you will be familiar with seeing sections, containers, and div blocks. So, according to being perfect from a technical standpoint, your site should be comprised of a header, which is where your navigation at the top will sit, your logo, and so on, a footer, which is where your footer navigation will sit, maybe another logo, copyright information, and so on, that will sit at the bottom of your page. And in between, you can see here, like in this page, we have multiple sections. And this is the section that holds your about info, services info, testimonials, your hero section, and so on. And then within each section, you have a thing called a container. In Webflow terms, a container is a center-aligned block of content which has a maximum width of 940 pixels on desktop and automatic margins on the left and the right, and that makes it centered. And then within this container, we have the things that hold our content. We have these things called div blocks. So this little square here is a div block. You can see in this section we have two. One that holds the hero image and one that holds the main title. And then within these div blocks, you'll put your text, your headings, your buttons, your paragraphs. You might even put other div blocks that contain buttons, for example, or whatever you need to have to build your content. We're going to be looking at these three: sections, containers, and div blocks. So I'm going to jump into Webflow to illustrate this for you. So without getting too deep, your web page is your body. So on Webflow, you'll see that everything sits inside the body of your page. And then, like we said, we have a header, we have a footer, and then we have sections in between. And I've put these tags here because if you're familiar with HTML, this will mean something to you. This is what your code will look like. So these are your tags, and this builds the HTML code in the background. We'll start with sections. On Webflow, when you drop in a section, it has 100% width of the page. There's no margins, there's no padding, and you can style it from there or do whatever you need to do from there. Sections have their own special tags when it comes to HTML, and if this means anything to you or SEO means anything to you, you might consider using sections quite seriously, because when Google crawls your website, when you get to SEO and into all the nitty-gritty, sections tell Google that your website is soundly structured. You have a good structure, it can read the content within the sections. And then also when you get to things like accessibility, screen readers will tell that there's a section and be able to accurately relay the content to the user. Sections are really helpful for just building a really technically sound website. So 100% width, and we'll talk about what you put in them next. The next container up is a container, and containers and the next one, divs, both have the same HTML tag, so there's not really a difference, but when you look at it on Webflow's side, there is a difference on how they are styled. So we have an empty section at the top. If I drag in a container into my section, you can see here it has a maximum width of 940 pixels, and that is the default. On tablet, it has a maximum width of 728 pixels, and on mobile, there's no max width, it fills the full width. So a container sits inside a section. Its HTML tag is div. This is just a nice way to structure the content within a section. It's also important to know that containers are by default center aligned, which means the margins are automatic on the left and the right. So you can see here, center aligned, maximum width on desktop, 940 pixels. And then the final block is a div block. And I've actually put two here, but we'll just start with one. A div block is basically anything you want it to be. It doesn't have to behave like any of the others. It can behave like a section. It can behave like the container. It can be a floating element in the middle of your site. It can overlay other elements. It can do whatever you need it to do. A div is a free-for-all HTML block, and you can put anything in it and do whatever you want with it. If I drag in a div block here, you can see here by default it will fill the full width of the container it's in, but then I can begin styling it. I can add padding on the left and the right. Div blocks by default on Webflow will hug whatever content is within it. So you can see here the height of this div is equal to the height of the heading which I've just dropped inside it. So when should you use which? Sections should typically be used to create the core sections of your page, like we said in the beginning, your hero section, your about section, testimonials, services, so on. Containers are a good way to organize the content within, giving a margin on the left and the right, maybe the top and the bottom. And then a div is a way to hold the content inside, a group of text, groups of buttons, groups of text and buttons and images, and you can kind of begin to structure your page in this way. So if we look at this theme that we're working on here, we've got the hero section, we've got a container which contains the hero image and the main title block. And in this case, the main title block has the heading, it has this button, it has a paragraph, and it has another group, another div of buttons. If we look at another section, the structure is completely different. We still have a section, a container within, but within this container they've actually built a grid. A grid is just a way to organize div blocks into rows and columns. So why does it matter? When you choose to build a cleaner site, you tend to use less sections, and this means your site will generally perform better and load a lot faster. And then finally, when you correctly name your blocks, debugging is easier, especially if another developer is coming into your website, and they'll be able to easily spot what's wrong and how the content is structured and what is going where. Ultimately, you can do whatever you want. You can build your page however you'd like, but the typical structure is sections, which are full width, containers, which have a maximum width of 940 pixels on desktop by default and are center aligned, but you can change this however you'd like. And then div blocks, which are your wildcard, you can do whatever you want with these, are really helpful for holding content and placing anywhere on your page. I hope that's given you a really quick insight and introduction to the block system on Webflow, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments below. We also now have a range of really lovely Webflow themes, which you can now buy from our website coastalthemes.com. I will see you in the next video. Bye!